Hi, welcome to this review. We'll have a look at this game played by two quite strong players. One was 1800, the other one was 2000, and these are FIDE ratings, so they're not as inflated. The game was generally just a big fight. Both sides made mistakes, both sides were better, both sides were worse. So such games are very interesting to analyze and to try to learn from. So it started as a Catalan, this closed variation, knight bd7. White chose this knight c3 move, which is a bit offbeat, but it is very ambitious. Generally, White shouldn't put his knight on c3 in the Catalan, since he wants to use the c-file at some point, and also oftentimes Black can take this pawn and try to hang on to it, though the move itself is quite fine. So Black takes e4, so White has sacrificed the pawn and he will try to attack in the center. Black plays this b5 move, so this was prepared. It's not the main move, but it is a good move. White played e5, which is maybe slightly inaccurate. Apparently knight b5 is good. The main point being that Black can't just exchange like this, because after knight g5, well, he can. This is quite fine. But here White is getting some advantage due to the very good bishop and some development advantage. This pawn might hang, after which the knight may go to c6. This is also weak, so White is looking at a potentially pawn advantage. But these are theoretical nuances. e5 was played, knight went to d5, knight b5. And this is a strange structure. Black has two isolated pawns on the c-file, though they are not as easy to take as it may look. Also, Black has the open b-file, he has the very weak d5 square, and there is dynamic compensation for both sides. So bishop b7, Black develops. Now White plays rook e1, which may be a bit abstract. It is overprotecting e5, but it's not necessarily too important to prevent c5 at this point, which is the idea. After c5, it's important to understand that this d6 square will always be weakened, so c5 is not necessarily very good for Black. Also, this pawn on d4 is also a potential weakness the whole time. So it all depends. But here, along with a lot of other moments, White should have played knight d2 at any point, always trying to put his knight on e4, which is a lot better than on f3, and preparing this plan of f4, f5, opening up the rook and all the other pieces as well. So we will see this is an idea that White should have played a lot of times. But rook e1 gives Black some advantage, and mainly I think because the rook may have been better here. a6, knight c3, knight takes c3, and here ironically Black should play c5, because now the knight is nowhere near d6 and Black is doing fine. But knight c3, again this changes the structure, and Black interestingly decides to delay the c5 advance the whole time. He moves around with his knight, which is fine. Queen c2, threatening some knight g5, but again, probably we should at some point play knight d2. I understand we don't generally want to exchange these bishops, but this is also weakness, which we should look at. And also the knight belongs on e4 in these positions, to look at these two squares in case Black wants counterplay. But queen c2 is okay. Bishop d5, h4, a very typical move in these positions, threatening some knight g5. Black usually replies h6, and this does kind of weaken the king side, but not too much. Sacrificing on h6 isn't very realistic yet, but it might become an idea at some point. White played bishop e3. Again, knight d2 is something we should consider. Putting the knight here, for example, after taking c5, White can get rid of his weaknesses, for example here, and put the knight on e4, potentially the bishop on e3 or a3, rook can go to b1, and no side has any advantage. It's a game, and white has no real problems, because at this point it's white that might have problems. Rook b8, rook a d1, and this move looks a bit weird, because the rook is never going to do anything on the c file, on the d file I mean. Black can still prepare his c5 advance if he would like. He just would like to move the queen, which he did. Again, knight d2 should be played. Okay, rook a d1, queen e8 is a very nice move, kind of threatening this, because any endgame will be in black's favor, since he has no weaknesses, and the white's only chance is probably to attack on the king side. Here, white again should have played knight d2. Instead, he decides to maneuver the knight through h2 potentially, but sadly there will be no attack. And why will there be no attack? Because white's not coordinated, and this will take quite a while, and black does have some defenders. He can play f5 as happened in the game, so white should be a bit less ambitious perhaps. For example, here something like bishop e4. Now the bishop is on a decent diagonal, and again we can try f4, f5, potentially try not to lose on the queen side, and there are chances for both sides. And here, queen e2, knight goes to a4, and now black is the first one creating threat. Bishop d2, now rook comes to b2, and black is now close to winning because he has the initiative. White has no attack, and he also has too many pieces here. He is quite cramped. His bishop is not doing much, his knight is not doing much. It should have been on d2 a while ago. Now queen e3, black takes some pawn, but now white gets at least some active pieces. Rook a1, black takes, and he goes back, giving back the pawn, but there was no necessity to give back this pawn. Black may have been understandably quite scared of whatever is happening on the king side, which is for now not much, but the pieces pointing towards it may have compelled him to try to bring more defenders to the king side. But he didn't really have to give away the pawn, he can just push it. And if we look at his position, there's not really too much that white can do. Well, black has a lot of moves that improve his position: queen c6, rook b8, or rook a8. Eventually maybe just move the knight and push the passed pawn as far as possible. And black is quite a bit better. But here, white got his pawn back. The rook is getting closer to the weaknesses, and he has some chances. Here black played f5, which again doesn't really make much sense, unless we are very scared of the attack, which black shouldn't have been on. Instead, just develop the queen, develop the rook, and black has some targets to attack. He has very good squares for his pieces. Eventually c5 will happen, getting rid of the weaknesses, while white will be left with a bad bishop and a bad structure. After f5, white should be happy to open up the position, because now his bishop has some potential to go here to this new diagonal. This knight will get a new square here, and the bishops will get exchanged, and there's no reason not to take it. It's unclear why white wouldn't take on f6, also creating a weakness on e6. So f5 was a big positional mistake. Queen e1 kind of goes beside the point to the queen side, but there's not really too much happening on the queen side. Queen c6, queen d1. Again, not clear what's this about, but okay. Rook a8. Now some pieces are exchanged, and finally white understands that his bishop and knight are not well placed, and he should move it as soon as possible. Knight e1, getting rid of some pressure. Black seems a bit better positionally, since he has the better bishop, the better structure, and potentially after c5 he might be able to attack these weaknesses. Okay, some pieces were exchanged. The knight goes to d5, and white now uses the weaknesses created by the move f5. And this is a big threat, after which this is a double attack. So queen f8, knight goes to f4, some exchanges, and in this position it seems white might be a little bit better, Since black still hasn't played c5, this bishop is not particularly hindered. It does have some tactical target at least. This is a weakness, this is a weakness, so it's becoming hard to defend for black. Queen c8 was played, but now black has crumbled under pressure. Probably c5 should have just been played. There's no reason not to play c5, trying to just exchange the backwards pawn. For example, after this, you can imagine if white just recaptures, then black will have a passed pawn, so he has to take here. And for example here, white can go for an advantage like this, but the pawns should be blockaded. Black still has the passed pawn, so no problems for either side. Queen c8, now queen g6 happens. This is a threat. King goes to f8, and now white missed the chance to win the game with a very nice pawn break, d5. And pawn breaks are quite important. Of course, they are very similar to forcing moves, which is that they change the nature of the position drastically. The point here is that after taking e6, mate is threatened, so queen e8 has to be played, but now white takes this, then this, and then this as well, and white will have a lot of pawns. And so this should have been played. Instead h5, which is a bit abstract, but it has the idea of sacrificing the bishop. But this wasn't necessary. If we look for more candidate moves, we will find this. Now black allows the sacrifice, and interestingly it's a very good move. White's h-pawn is very strong. Black has no counterplay in the meantime. This is also weakness, so this was a very good decision by white. And now white is completely winning. Bishop d8, h7, queen g7, the only move. But now sadly white missed the only move to win, which is queen h5. Point being queen h8. And now even d5 is winning, but queen h6 is simple enough, with the idea to play d5 next. And after taking e6, black is completely paralyzed. His king will have to go away from the g8 square. And for example here, white will win with queen to g8 next move. So this is quite difficult, but on the way white had more wins available. He can even bring the king somewhere. Interestingly, black can basically not move anything. Importantly, if the black tries to get rid of the queen here, white always has this queen f6 check. You exchange queens and black will not be able to stop the pawns. So quite difficult, but possible. Here the game is supposed to be drawn, but it is still very complicated, and it should be clear that white is the one playing for a win with his many pawns and safer king. A few moves passed, and white, I think, didn't really get as much as he could have. Probably taking here was the big mistake, as now a perpetual happens. After queen d5, a very specific move, white can keep the initiative. For example, after moving the queen, the bishop, I mean, white can try to win another pawn. And for example here, this kind of endgame is very interesting. There are many pawns, and if black gets to blockade on the light squares, then he will be fine, but it still seems quite difficult to play for black. Instead, in the game, this kind of perpetual happened. Now white surprisingly doesn't really have many ways to avoid the perpetual. Bishop h4 is a very nice move, and black has calculated that it is a perpetual. Here white could go down, but this is also a perpetual. Well, I mean queen f4 specifically. This is a known pattern with the pawn on f2. Black will always check the king around so as not to let him escape. For example here, this is a known pattern. If here, then here. If here, then continue on h4 and g4. So after all, it was objectively a draw here, and the black found the correct checks, so he eventually defended well. So it's a very interesting game, a lot of mistakes, a lot of good moves, and simply a good fight, which is what we want from these longer games.